Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the November 1st, 2022 Cobb County Planning Commission zoning hearing. I'm Michael Hughes. I'm the vice chair. I'll be filling in for Stephen Vault, our chair, who's not able to attend this morning. With that, I would like to ask Pastor Joe if he would come up and provide the invocation.
Let us all bow our heads in prayer. Heavenly Father, you are the creator and builder of all things. You are the source of all of our many blessings. We thank you for every gift that we have been given. We ask you to bless this meeting and guide it with everyone attending here. Direct this meeting so that it is filled with wisdom, productivity, and most of all, respect for each other. Thank you for helping us to accomplish the work for our community that is set before us today. And we say these things in your glorious name. Amen.
Amen. Please join me in reciting the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, with that, Mr. Peterson, if you could go over the zoning procedures and how the hearing will be held today.
Thank you. Good morning to the folks in attendance today. Today's hearing will be conducted with the following process and procedure. Each case will be called in numerical order. When the case is called, we would ask that the applicant please stand and raise their hand so they can show that they are in attendance. Then after that, we're going to call to see if there's anyone here opposed to that specific case. We would also ask that the opposition please stand and raise their hand so that they can be counted for the official record. After recognizing both parties, they will be called to the front to be sworn in. It's important to note that the applicant will testify first and the opposition, if any, will testify second. Each side gets 10 minutes to state their case or concerns. There's not a rebuttal process and there's not a process to reserve your time. So you want to convey all your information to the board within your 10-minute time period. Additionally, if there's more than one person here who wishes to speak on the case, you may want to coordinate with each other about what you're going to talk about because each side only gets 10 minutes and you don't want to cover the same information over and over. After that, the board will start to discuss the case at hand. From the discussions, the board may ask one or more speakers to come back to the front for additional comments or questions. After that, they're going to make a decision to either hold, continue, approve, or deny the matter at hand. There are 3 cases on today's agenda which have been withdrawn without prejudice, and these cases will not be heard. First case is rezoning case Z69 of 2022, Beezer Homes LLC. This case has been withdrawn without prejudice and will not be heard today. Next case is rezoning case Z70 of 2022, David Lanik, Must Ministries. This case has been withdrawn without prejudice and will not be heard today. And SLEP 5 of 2022, Parallel Towers 3, LLC, also known as Parallel Infrastructure, LLC. This case has been withdrawn without prejudice and will not be heard today. Mr. Vice Chair and Board, there are 3 other cases in which the applicants have requested a withdrawal, but it came in after we printed the agenda. First case is rezoning case Z75, ADP, Mars Hill Road, LLC. The applicant is asking this case be withdrawn without prejudice, and we will need a vote by the board for that.
This is in District 1.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Move to allow the withdrawal without prejudice of both Z75 and SLUP 15. I presume they, Mr. Peterson, they also want that withdrawn without prejudice?
I was going to do it, and I was going to do it separately, not together.
Separately? Okay, that's fine. Then in that case, just simply move to withdraw, allow the withdrawal of Z75 without prejudice.
Thank you.
All right, we have a motion. We have a second.
Second.
Motion and a second. We'll call the question. Passes 4-0.
Thank you. Next case is SLEP 13, WH Storage LLC. Mr. Vice Chair and Board, the applicant is asking this case be withdrawn without prejudice.
Move to grant the request to withdraw SLEP 13, 2022 as requested.
Second.
13. SLEP 13, correct. I'm sorry, SLEP 13, excuse me. All right, we have a motion and a second. Call the question. approved 4-0.
Okay, and last case I have today that wishes to withdraw without prejudice is SLEP 15 of 2022, ADP Mars Hill Road LLC.
Mr. Chair, move to allow the withdrawal of SLUP 15 without prejudice.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Call the question. All right, approved 4-0.
Thank you. There are a number of cases on today's printed agenda which have been withdrawn, which have been continued or held by the Planning Commission or staff, and these cases will not be heard today. First case is rezoning case Z55 of 2022, Kenneth B. Clary. This case was continued by the staff, and the new continuance date is February 7th, 2023, the Planning Commission hearing next year. So we're not going to hear that one for 2 more months, or 3 months. Next case is rezoning case Z60 of 2022, Branch Acquisition Company LLC. This case was continued by the staff until the December 6th, 2022 Planning Commission zoning hearing. So Z60 will not be heard today. Rezoning case Z67 of 2022, SMB Investments Incorporated. This case was continued by the staff until the December 6th, 2022 Planning Commission zoning hearing. So Z67 will not be heard today. Rezoning case Z71 of 2022, Hamilton Homes Holdings, LLC. This case was continued by the staff until the December 6th, 2022 Planning Commission zoning hearing. So Z71 will not be heard today. Rezoning case Z72 of 2022, Brock-Built Homes, LLC. This case was continued by the staff until the December 6th, 2022 Planning Commission zoning hearing. So Z72 will not be heard today. Rezoning case Z74 of 2022, Building New Pathways LLC. This case was continued by the staff until the December 6th, 2022 Planning Commission zoning hearing. So Z74 will not be heard today. Rezoning case Z76 of 2022, Vasco Properties LLC. This case was continued by the staff until the December 6th, 2022 Planning Commission zoning hearing. So Z76 will not be heard today. LUP 21 of 2022, Roger Alexander. This case was held until the December 6th, 2022 Planning Commission zoning hearing. So LUP 21 will not be heard today. LUP 23 of 2022, Koyman Heladio Mazareos Reyes. This case was continued by the staff until the December 6th, 2022 Planning Commission zoning hearing. So LUP 23 will not be heard today. And Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chair and Board, we did get a request this morning that the applicant would like to continue rezoning case Z58, Pulte Home Company, until the December 6th zoning hearing.
Mr. Chair, I move to allow the applicant to have his case continued until the December hearing, Z58.
Thank you, Commissioner Maloney. We have a second.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? We'll call the question. Motion approves 4-0.
Thank you. And before we start the consent agenda, I would like to ask the people in today's audience, if you have a cell phone, please turn your cell phone off, as when they ring, they do interfere with the broadcast presentation. And any person wishing to speak before the Board of Commissioners must file a campaign contribution disclosure statement if they made a campaign contribution of $250 or more to a current member of the Board of Commissioners within the last 2 years. Additional information about this requirement is located on the table in the back of the room. And I want to remind applicants, opposition, or any interested party that information is due to this board the Monday prior to this hearing. Any information submitted to the board after the due date may or may not be considered by the board at their discretion. And with that, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair and Board, I'm ready to start the consent agenda. Cobb County Planning Commission zoning hearing consent agenda for November 1st, 2022. First case on consent is zoning case Z73 of 2022. Realty Corp. Thornton LLC requests rezoning from R20 to LI for light industrial in land lot 583 of the 18th district. The property is located on the south side of I-20, on the north side of Interstate West Parkway, east of Thornton Road. Staff recommends approval, subject to the following conditions. Number one, site plan received September 1st, 2022, with the district commissioner making minor modifications. Number 2, final elevation to be approved by the district commissioner. Number 3, fire department comments and recommendations. Number 4, stormwater management division comments and recommendations. And number 5, water and sewer comments and recommendations. Is the applicant present? Let the record show the applicant is here. Is there anyone here opposed? Rezoning case Z73.
No.
Let the record show there's no one opposed. And moving into land use permits on the consent agenda, LUP 20 of 2022. Chelsea Hurst requests a temporary land use permit for produce sales in land lot 535 of the 16th district. The property is located on the west side of Missy Drive, north of Shelby Lane. Staff recommends approval for 24 months, subject to number 1, no sales from this location, number 2, no exterior signs, and number 3, DOT comments and recommendations. Is the applicant present? Let the record show the applicant is here. Is there anyone here opposed to LUP 20?
No.
Let the record show there's no one opposed, and that completes the consent agenda, Mr. Vice Chair and Board.
All right. You've heard the consent agenda. We'll need a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Motion to approve?
We have a motion. We have a second.
Second.
All right. Any discussion? All right. Call the question. All right. Consent agenda is approved 4-0.
Okay, and all those folks that were on consent, you're free to go. Just come back in 2 weeks for the Board of Commissioners zoning hearing. And moving into the held and continued part of the agenda. First case is rezoning case Z56 of 2022. Ison Chetty requests a rezoning from R30 to R20 for single-family residences in land lot 321 of the 19th district. Property is located on the west side of West Sandtown Road, north of Friendship Church Road. Is the applicant present? Let the record show the applicant is here. Is there anyone here opposed? Rezoning case Z56.
No.
Let the record show there's no one opposed. Would the applicant please come forward to be sworn in?
If you could state your name for the record and then provide us with the background on your project and what you'd like to do.
For sure. Thank you. I'm Ruel Chetty. I have Isan Chetty with me, who's the owner of the property. We are requesting rezoning 1534 West Sandtown Road from R30 to R20. Just a little bit of timeline background. I was late 21. My dad and his friend Donald Mears had agreed to separate the property that was originally located at 1530 West Sandtown, which is the adjacent surrounding property. At that time, they had made an agreement that my dad was going to live on one side and Donald Larry Mears was supposed to be living on the other side. After that time, my dad moved into my rental, which is next door to me. The kids enjoyed living next to the grandparents, so the discussion was that we would try to build 2 houses on this lot to kind of recreate what we have right now in Powder Springs. So I think in February they had split the land, completed the subdivision between Larry and my dad, and I think around April we came up with the idea of now putting 2 houses on that 1 acre lot located at 1534 West Sandtown. Upon going through the documentation, I believe the last time we came through, there was a clause that was found that we weren't supposed to be subdividing until 12 months after the original subdivision date. So I was not aware of that at the time that we had made that decision. And I believe we were held in continuance until Stormwater had done their evaluation. I think that's where we are at this point.
Okay.
So-
All right. Thank you. We appreciate that. And I know there's no opposition, I don't believe, at this time. So this is in District 1. Commissioner Boulogne, lead the discussion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Let me go ahead and let you folks have first of all, have you submitted a proposed, there's your proposed or a partial plan. Have you submitted any elevations or any house plans or anything regarding?
No, we haven't even gotten that far yet. We wanted to wait for a decision from the board before we move down that road.
Sure. Okay. Do you have a rough idea of how you want to divide this up into lots?
Yeah, so basically on the screen right now is the 2 half-acre segments, and we are hoping to put the houses as far forward to Sandtown Road as possible.
So what I'm probably going to do is to recommend that we get you some guidance today and ask you to come back with a plan, but that'll likely be what I recommend. But before we go there, let me ask you just to have a seat for a minute, and then if you listen to what Stormwater has to say, let's see if we can move this thing forward a little bit today.
Awesome.
But have a seat for a second, then I'll probably have some more questions for you at the end.
Sounds good. Thank you, sir.
Does anyone, unless anyone else has questions for the applicant at this time? Okay. Let me start with Stormwater.
Carver, Cobb County Stormwater.
Okay. So I see there's a sanitary sewer easement running right now to Brody Drive.
Correct. I think that was extended at some point into the parent track.
Okay. And then I see a pipeline easement running across near Brody Drive.
Yes.
Okay. Do those create any particular impediments, or do they give you any?
Not from a stormwater standpoint.
Okay. From a stormwater standpoint, what should we be looking at here as a planning commission, in your opinion?
Well, it was originally 2.9 acres, and then it came in through a lot split to cut out 1 acre tract, and that's acceptable to create 2 lots from 1. But then now it's coming in to split the 1 acre tract into 2 tracts. So we've effectively created a subdivision. Subdivisions are defined as 3 or more lots. So now we've got 3 lots and no stormwater management has been provided.
And where would a prudent point be on this tract for stormwater, for some sort of detention?
Probably to the rear of those lots in the area of the parent tract or at the rear of the 2 lots.
That's due to topography, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so that would be somewhere in the southwest corner?
Yes.
All right, any other planning points or concepts you wish to make sure we're aware of as we move forward here?
Well, if approved, our recommendations are that the 2 lots provide on-site stormwater management mitigation, because now we've got, 2 lots providing impervious that's draining to the west, southwest, without any mitigation.
Anyone else have any questions for, or Mr. Chair, I pass Mr. Carver, if anyone else? Okay, thank you. If I could have Amy Diaz come up. All right.
Amy Diaz, Cobb DOT.
More or less the same question for you. Will the further subdivision of this property trigger any concerns for the DOT at all?
We've recommended that they have a shared driveway between the 2 lots because of the classification of West Santan Road.
When you say for the 2 lots, do you mean the 2 existing lots or for the?
The 2 new lots that are fronting on West Santan.
Would you want to create like an internal frontage road or just a shared driveway between the two?
For just 2 lots, I would say a shared driveway between the two should be sufficient.
And would you recommend that be wide enough to allow 2 cars to pass or what?
We would have to look at the final design, but generally speaking, no, what we want is a normal width driveway at the roadway and then to split in some fashion to the 2 homes.
And what about the new lots they're proposing to create? What about access to those?
Those, I would presume, would have access off the cul-de-sac, and so I don't have any DOT concerns from those.
Same, pass the,
Just to make sure I'm clear, so, Amy, the last comment was about the lot that would remain, the 1.9 acres, is that correct? That would be the access off the cul-de-sac?
There are 2, no, I can't read the numbers from here, but there are 2, it looks like there are 2 lots that front the cul-de-sac, one closest to Suntown Road and one behind.
So I think that's just one, right? Is that-
Okay, if it's 1 lot, then that's fine. Basically, accessing off the cul-de-sac, as long as they can get the driveways in, it's not going to cause an issue with through traffic, so.
Only question, just, we got the 40-foot building line. In terms of the, that setback, if there were a shared access point, would that necessitate practically having that building line move back? Or is that something where you think that that could fit in with the shared access and still be sufficiently safe and designed according to the standards you'd want?
It could, it really depends on their driveway design. Like, they could take a single driveway behind both homes and then split it. Or they could split it much closer to the roadway, as long as, we have to see what design they have to be able to comment on it.
Got it. And if there were a storm, just thinking through the steps here, if there were a stormwater management facility required on site, it probably negates any options for that backyard to be used for driveway.
Yeah, well, and Carl can speak to this, but I know stormwater facilities have to have access, public access, so not sure how that would interact with these driveways.
Okay. And my question is just to kind of understand if, from a practical standpoint, if the combination of shared access for the drive and stormwater management on site, make it a really tight site to program everything on there. So that's why I'm just really speaking to that. So I appreciate you walking us through that.
No problem, I understand.
okay, just work me through, it appears there's a 10-foot no access easement along West Sandtown. Do you see that?
Yeah, so when the lot was originally done, that would be because it would be supposed to access off the cul-de-sac and not West Sandtown. But because of the alignment of the new lots, if these lots are approved, they would have to access West Sandtown. So that no access easement would have to be removed for the driveway access, a single driveway access.
All right, thank you very much.
Problem.
Mr. Peterson, any other particular concerns that we can help to guide the applicant?
Not regarding stormwater or DOT, if this comes down to the architectural style of the home, then, what the planning commission can look at is requiring that he submits something similar to what he wants to do prior to the BOC hearing in 2 weeks.
What portion of this property is within the Ansley Grove subdivision? Is there an understanding there?
I don't think any of this is in the Ansley Grove subdivision.
Okay. All right, let me get the applicant to come back up. Would you folks be willing to come back with a plan that shows where the subdivision lines would go for the lots, and then show some form of stormwater detention and bring that back to us as a supplemental submission?
That makes sense.
Okay.
And then would also the driveway, I guess, design at that point, would that be shown on there as well?
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant? Pass them. Okay. Thank you. You can have a seat.
Thank you.
My motion will be that we hold this one more month to allow the applicant to submit a plan for review by Stormwater and by DOT to make sure we comply with their demands and concerns before moving this matter forward to the Board of Commissioners.
All right, we have a motion from Commissioner Bowling.
Second.
All right, we have a second. Any discussion? We'll call the question. Motion to hold this for another 30 days is approved 4-0.
All right, next case is rezoning case Z65 of 2022, Drapac Investments LLC. The applicant is requesting rezoning from RA5 to RA5 for a single-family attached and detached subdivision in land lots 87 and 88 of the 18th district. Property is located on the west side of Michael Road, south of Vanessa Circle, at the terminus of Linda Drive, and at the terminus of Oak Hill Drive. The applicant is present. Is there anyone here opposed to rezoning case Z65? Please keep your hands raised. Four. Okay, let the record show there's 4 people here in opposition. All those who would like to address the board, please come forward to be sworn in.
How you doing?
All right, Mr. Sams, if you could state your name for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. Good morning, each of you. For the record, my name is Garvis Sams. I'm with the law firm of Sams, Larkin, and Huff here in Marietta, and have the privilege of representing Drapac Investments Incorporated. And I have with me today Mr. Jim Sibley, who's with Drapac, and obviously our engineer, Mr. Jeff Smith, and they're seated right there, reluctantly raising their hands. But very seriously, both of them are expert in their respective fields, and to the extent I can't field a question or dance around it, then I'd like for them to be available, since they're the ones that have done the technical aspects of the entirety of the proposal. The interesting history on this property, and if you've lived in Cobb, you may be familiar with it, but the property itself is oddly configured. This is a 19.45 acre tract of land. It's located on the west side of Michael Road. It's on the south side of Vanessa Circle. It's at the terminus of Linda Drive and at the terminus also of Oak Hill Drive. And it has contiguity, as you can see, to the north to the city of Ackworth there, and I believe another couple of places as well. What you see here, this is the future land use map, and our property is on the right, or on the east, if you will. And you can see everything going back in a westerly direction is also MDR. And you see the lots that are subdivided there. Those are part of the MDR, part of the application that came forward for MDR back in 2005 and 2006 and was zoned. In the interim, without getting into the minutiae of all the chronology and the details, in the interim, about a 37-acre tract you can see dividing the developed portions and the subject property today was conveyed to Cobb County. So Cobb County owns this parcel in the middle and is in between, as you can see, the crosshatched area there and the area denominated as RA5, but the county has owned that. And that gives you, that's a GIS map reaching or overexposed to an aerial photograph. That gives you the understanding of where this is positioned. And it's positioned within subdivisions of an established ilk that were done years ago. Their homes to the north and Austell, as little as 900 square feet. Their homes to the east and west, built, it looks like, in the 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s. And they're not that small. They're very, very nicely kept homes, but definitely a subdivision. And if you look back at, I think, some of the potential adverse comments may originate from the way Linda Drive, as you can see, terminates actually and extends beyond the property line and is stubbed into our property, and it's built on the Linda Drive side to the county's design and detail specs. So it's public street. Everything we've got are public streets, so no one's asking for any type of private relief out of this. Not only has it come back before the board as rezonings, it's come back on a couple of occasions as other business, so there's been quite a lot of tweaking in the past, I guess the past 20 years on this piece. But this particular piece right here is laying idle for some time. And I've got an August 4th letter I sent to certain of y'all and to certain of my clients. It's got an exhaustive history. If you ever want to put yourself to sleep at night, I'll scan and send it to you, and you can read it. What DRAPAC is proposing here is a combination split residential community between, as you can see on the west, those are single-family detached homes. Of course, the property is bifurcated, dissected again by the stream bank buffer and the protected 37 acres that I believe is in a conservation easement. And then going on in an easterly direction, those are the townhomes. We originally had, I think it was 57, but we've reduced that by 16. So our density has come down to right at 5, I think 4.98 to 4.46 units per acre here. The homes that DRAPAC will build, well, first of all, they don't call this Maxim Farms. Surprise, surprise. But it's a good name for it because it certainly gives identity to this historical section of South Cobb. Here you see a mixture mostly of towns, the single-family detached. Again, these are the rows of townhomes, and having jettisoned 16 of those, the site lays out a little better. And you may say, well, why not all single-family detached? Well, it's pretty clear to a layperson or someone with a trained eye, and certainly to an engineer, that the topographical aspects of this property, particularly on the eastern side, are daunting. The contours are tight, they're tough. Jeff Smith is the kind of engineer that, instead of working against the topo, works with the topo. And to be honest with you, the 16 more in there was a little bit of a squeeze logistically. What we've got now is perfect. In addition to the topographical problems, developmental obstacles, we've also got the stream traverse nature of the property. And as Mr. Carver will tell you, they don't do stream bank buffer averaging anymore. I think neither the state nor the county. So we're recognizing those 75-foot buffers on either side of any stream that traverses the property. We submitted this architecture with the application, but the most recent architecture very, very similarly. We can establish contiguity to the city of Austell, and I'm certainly enamored with Austell and the great things that they and that city have done, but this property is just logically positioned to be in Cobb, served by Cobb, so we sought no advantage. Well, actually, we didn't seek anything. We didn't even talk with the folks in Austell, and I've not heard from them. So that's the reason you haven't seen any House bill agreements or intergovernmental agreement objections or even concurrences. We've got a letter on September the 7th that says what we're doing. So it's a total of 57 single-family townhomes, 29 single-family detached residents. It's 4.46 units per acre. This area, as I showed you earlier, is not just within or on the edge of, it's within a large swath of property that is designated as MDR on your future land use map, which is medium density residential, anywhere from 0 to 5 units per acre. An amalgamation of all the rezonings that were done over the years and other business applications. I think They got to an as-built density of right around 3.8 units per acre. I'm sure John ciphered it right now in his head better than I can, but that's what I've come up with. I'm sorry. 2 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I told you about the home sizes. We'll follow DOT's recommendations, the 50-foot straight line, so there's not any interruption with firefighters or DOT going in and out. With this, we originally found this, Mr. Chairman, as another business application. We met with staff, and that was the concurrence at that time, but ultimately the manager of the division decided that was a little too broad of a scope, as did the district commissioner. So we withdrew the other business application, just went through the straight zoning process. So that's the reason it's like this. But it also gives you an explanation of why we're a little behind the 8 ball on the traffic impact study. We have one underway. We have it commissioned. We'll have it ready and submitted to DOT before the BOC hearing in 2 weeks. But it's being worked on right now, and just hopefully that explains why it is not ready at this moment. It's a uniquely positioned property with the odd points of ingress and egress, and I would have thought that maybe someone left it out in the cold, but if those streets weren't built to design detail specs and stubbed into this property, was clearly meant to be utilized at the time that Skip Harper and his group rezoned it back in 2005, 2006. There are an awful lot of details that staff has provided to us. Sorry to say thrown at us, but provided to us, and there's no way to really cover the technicalities of that at this moment. I'm happy to see some people show up. There's not an organized group of folks, but there's folks that we've gotten calls from, so we'll be happy in the next 2 weeks to chat some more with them. So with that being said, we ask that you follow your staff's recommendation for approval, but that you do it at 4.46 units per acre instead of 4 units per acre. And theirs wasn't based on a plan, but it was based on a feeling and their professional observations. So with there being 5 seconds, I'll wrap up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, now we'll hear from the opposition. And the opposition will have 10 minutes.
Good morning. My name is Lori Heron, and my family has owned a house on Brenda Drive there since the mid-1960s. I still live there. There are several families that still own houses in the neighborhood. It's a very quiet neighborhood. We enjoy the peace and quiet most of the time. But we do have concern with this development because the only entrance to the townhome development is off Linda Drive. And there are at present about 56 units of townhomes applied for there, and we're thinking that there'll be at least about 100 cars going in and out of the subdivision, our subdivision, every morning and every evening, which will have a lot of impact on us. The streets that are there now are, since they were built in the 50s, they don't have curb and gutter or sidewalks. So when we're out walking our dogs, we have to jump in the storm ditch because they're not piped ditches from the county. So we have to either jump into the ditch to get out of the road or go to a neighbor's driveway just to get out of the way. Same way with kids walking to the bus. So we've created a petition. We've got several, probably about 40 signatures against the development because the main entrance is on Linda Drive for the townhome development. And we ask that the entrance be moved to an arterial road, such as Maxim Road, instead of Linda Drive.
Thank you. Anyone else speaking in opposition?
My name is Patricia Orr, and I've been living in that neighborhood since it was
If you
built.
could, I'm sorry, if you could repeat your name so everybody.
Patricia Orr.
Thank you.
And I've been living there since it was built back in 1950, around 54, something like that. And when my parents died, I sold my house where I lived and bought that house along with all the property. I have about 4 acres. It includes a lake and several streams, for which I know these lakes and this lake and these streams continue down the road. And I know there's, because I've always been around there, there's wetlands on this property. And this will destroy the wetlands. Also, I know that there's rock formations, and the blasting will cause danger to both residents and to the animals around there. And so it's not just, oh, I don't want 200 cars going up and down my street. Obviously, no one does. And it is a tiny little street, and with people parking on the street for their house because it is an old established neighborhood, there's just going to be that one little section you can drive down. This will not be a safe place for children or for animals or for people. Right now, we can barely accommodate on these streets the houses that are there. This street is not built, Linda Drive is not built in order to be able to accommodate all of these other units and all of the vehicles that would come with it. So I hope that you can be able to look at this as this is going to present safety hazards in the building of it, as well as concerns for safety. Not just it's going to be an inconvenience for the people there, and it's going to destroy my property value. And when I bought that house, I had no intention of living anywhere else. I would not have sold my house when my parents died and bought that house, but it's a place I've always felt safe and wanted to live. And it's just not going to be anything at all like anybody would want to live in, having 200 cars going up and down that little street all day long. That is not going to work. That's all. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Mike Bowen. I think all this is going to probably affect me more than anybody. I've lived at the corner there of Michael and Linda. They're actually going to have to extend Linda and cut a road through the edge of my property to get back there to access it. You know, on an extra acre of land. It's all going to be right in my backyard. I've lived there since I was 24 years old for 44 years, and it's a very nice, quiet subdivision. I think the gentleman said there's going to be like 50-something townhouses. Actually, 73 is what's on the proposal. And the neighborhood just can't handle the traffic. I mean, it's going to be crazy. I'm the only driveway on a little short dead end. The guy beside me's got 10 acres, very private. That's the reason, you know, we all live in a place like that. And it's going to be so much traffic, and plus the road right away has got to be cut through my edge of my property to get back there. They own over 2,000 foot on Maxim Road, which is a 4-lane. I know it would cost a little more to come through that way and put a little bridge, but this is all about them saving money to cut a road right there, and not consideration at all of the people that lives there. That's what y'all would consider real good. Thank y'all very much.
Thank you, sir.
Travis McComb, Cobb County School District. Approval of this petition will cause great concern for Cobb County School District, as it will have an impact on the enrollment of one school, Mableton Elementary, which is already over capacity. Thank you.
All right. Any other opposition? Okay, that closes the public hearing for Z65 2022. This is in District 4, which is my district, so I will lead the discussion on this one. If I could have Amy Diaz from DOT come up.
Amy Diaz, DOT.
Hey, Amy, the applicant already referenced the, I guess, required traffic study has not been submitted yet. I guess that's in process at this
Correct.
point. I just want to understand DOT's recommendation with respect to the traffic study, and I guess what were some of the assumptions? I think you all have to approve assumptions ahead of time before.
No, we don't have approved assumptions at this time, so I don't know what intersections are definitively going to be studied. The biggest part of the DOT recommendations is the fact that we know that Linda Drive and Oak Hill Drive are older roadways that are not up to heavy vehicle traffic like construction traffic. And so we have added an extra stipulation that those roads will need to be repaved after the heavy construction vehicles are complete, with their work on these lots of property.
A point that was brought up last week and when I was on a virtual meeting for District 4 was a potential blind hill down at Oak Hill Drive.
Yes, and I'm glad you brought that to my attention. I have brought that to our traffic operations attention, and they said that they will go out there and look at it. We'll have that information before the Board of Commissioners meeting. But there's a couple things that we can do. Line of sight easements and great regrading are things that we talk about the most. For a very low volume situation such as this, they may also consider an all-way stop as a sight distance safety measure.
Okay, all right, thank you.
They have to confirm that there's an issue. I looked at the on-street view, and it did appear, I see the concern, but they have to confirm it for me.
Okay, all right, thank you. Are there fellow commissioners have any other questions for DOT?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I heard one of the opponents indicate that he wished the road went elsewhere and referenced specifically another road, I think Maxim Road.
Correct.
Okay.
We don't have a recommendation for that because there's no frontage that we could see that would allow them to access Maxim. So they have the stream on that side. I don't see how they could get through, but stormwater could treat whether or not they can go that way, I suppose.
Okay. So which entrance possibility would be the least burden on the adjoining homeowners or neighborhoods?
As far as traffic?
Yes.
They're pretty close. The single-family homes is considerably smaller number of units, so it's somewhat less traffic. We actually did a trip generation for this in preparation. The daily trip, just to give a reference, the daily trip for 23 single-family homes is estimated at 217 vehicles per day. For 57 multifamily homes, the trip generation is considerably lower. It's 384. So you have over twice the number of units of the townhomes. So there is more traffic there, but it's a lower trip generation rate, so it's not double.
Okay. And how many townhomes were you calculating based on?
57, that's the most recent site plan.
Okay, but I thought they said today they were reducing that to a lower number.
And if they were reducing it again, then that will lower again.
Actually, Commissioner, I think it was originally 73, and it got reduced to 57.
Oh, okay. 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 Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, thank you, Amy.
No problem. And the one thing I do want to mention is Linda Drive will have to be extended from where it currently terminates to their property, but that's a very short section, so I don't have it in the comments specifically. But it will impact the two homeowners on either side that are currently kind of using that area. But that is county right away.
Okay, I was going to clarify that. That is county right away.
Correct.
Okay, so the vehicle that's shown there is technically on county right away.
It would have to be relocated to a different part of the property.
Okay, thank you. All right, questions for the zoning division manager. John, if you could just provide staff's recommendation and a little bit of background on what led you to that decision.
Okay, the staff did recommend that the application be approved for a maximum of 4 units per acre with all single-family homes. We felt that, since this is surrounded by single-family homes, that would be the most appropriate type of housing to put into the subdivision. When this was originally approved, it was approved for over the entire subdivision on the other side of the creek too was about 3.5 units per acre, which includes what's already built on Maxim Road. So the staff recommendation was kind of right in the middle of where they began and what they were allowed to have, because they began at 97 units. They were allowed to have 63 per the original zoning, so we felt at 4 units per acre, that was almost right in the middle. So that would allow about 78 units of detached housing.
Okay, thank you. Any questions the commissioners have? Staff? Okay. If I could have the applicant come back up, please.
Yes, sir.
So, Mr. Sams, just thinking about staff's recommendations, I know you indicated that y'all have backed off on the latest site plan backs off, at least from a density perspective, on number of units from 4.99, I think, down to 4.46, but you're still, and that's basically because you reduced the number of townhomes from 73 to 57. But staff's recommendation is that the townhomes actually go away completely and that the single-family detached. Is that doable for y'all at this point? Is that something that?
If I may, I don't know if that was a question, but I'm hoping it was.
I'm sorry, what's the question?
The townhomes are a little differently positioned than the location of the single-family homes. And I think I mentioned it, I didn't delve on it, but you've got staff members here that can, well, you can look at the contours that are there now, but you can also, if you're familiar with the property, you understand its topo and the way that it just it manipulates that townhome component. Plus, when I say, I'm not trying to say that the townhome component's a stream traverse, but we had more, we were closer to the stream, and we're looking at potential encroachments into the buffer. So, well, Mr. Smith, and you know, there's many engineers who try to put 10 pounds in a 9-pound bag, and that's not what he's done. In fact, he's done just the opposite. Actually, we could have gone lighter at the beginning, but I think we're perfect now, and don't fight the topo, and it's going to look really more aesthetically pleasing than a single-family home, which would have disparate elevations and wouldn't be able to build and aesthetically as good a position as these are. Plus, I don't know about diminishing house values, and I know we don't stick price points, but starting with the towns, we're 4 up, and the single-family 4 and 5 up. So we're not going to be diminishing anyone's either quiet enjoyment of their property or the fair market value of their property.
Could you put up the GIS map again that shows the land uses and the zonings that touch the actually the other?
Yes, sir, Mr. Hughes. Which one?
No, actually the other map.
Okay.
That one, yeah.
Yes, sir.
Enlarge that a little bit. There's a way to do that. We're good. So just looking at this though, townhomes, the predominant use in the area, everything that this property touches is single family. So Austell, that's single family. I don't know what the zoning is there. I'm going to guess it's probably R20.
It's 900 square foot homes on balance, Mr. Chairman. In Austell.
And I guess to the east, you've got R20. These are single family homes, all one home on one lot. Again, likewise to the south, R20 single-family homes. And so when I guess when I look at this, that's the anomaly is the townhome portion of this. That's just my opinion.
Well, and our desire, and I think we may have mentioned this to you, and it was, sometimes the most simplistic of things work, and sometimes they just don't. And our original thought was to flip the towns with the single family, but from a developmental perspective, it just fits better this way. And it's not we're not tied to a business model. We are tied to some density in terms of contractual issues, but. I see your concerns, but with the price points of these, the way they're going to be oriented, and the stipulations I didn't get into with respect to the language from the DOT and the fire marshal on the myriad of uses and stipulations they have, I think it's ensured to be a development that has great maneuverability and pedestrian connectivity, but long way around answering your question.
And I know it was suggested that access from Maxim Road, is that even remote, is that even feasible?
It's, well, you can throw enough money at anything and traverse 37 acres and then ask the county to condemn some acreage on the, no, that's, even if we got it all for free, which we wouldn't, because it would, as the gentleman has suggested, require a vehicular aerial pedestrian connection over a large span of floodplain wetlands, which is that middle part.
Any other questions, comments from?
Could you address the citizens' concern that of the impact on streams and water that they enjoy currently in the subdivision?
I'm sorry, did you ask about downstream hydrological circumstances or on site?
I guess I'm asking this because I'm not familiar. Okay. But the citizens' statement was that, you know, there's lake, there's streams that they enjoy in the adjacent neighborhood and that those would be impacted. Can you address that?
I'm not sure, the young lady that spoke, I don't know where her lake is, but if this is an aerial of the property and what surrounds it, and the major bodies of water are the streams that traverse it in a north-south fashion. I do know this, we're having to over-detain, we're having to improve on water quality. We're putting the detention ponds where Mr. Carver and his staff have asked us to. I don't know of any downstream issues. That's one of the first questions I ask Mr. Carver at these applicants' meetings. So if there are some, then if they're emanating from this side, that would be a surprise. But we've agreed to do pre and post studies on any bodies of water reasonably located downstream. And to give a capacity analysis on being able to get it off the site and downstream.
Can you speak to the citizen concerns about safety impact and also construction impact on Linda Drive?
As far as safety impacts, we'll follow staff's recommendations on construction in terms of access to the property. We feel like we're going to be able to stage most of it from within the property in terms of grading and balancing it and doing the things we need to do. Of course, when the construction of the homes began, that changes, but if I'm not mistaken, and I did the stipulate a month or so ago, if there's not hours of operation, we'll certainly agree to those. But I think because what DOT has recommended, all the quiet residential streets are not going to have any impact during the construction time.
Is the proposal for sidewalks in the new development?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, but
yes, ma'am. And quite honestly, we can't get into system improvements, but we can certainly off-site make certain the street is extended to the end of Linda Drive, and as Ms. Diaz said, it stops, I don't know, 60, 70 feet short. And it is being utilized, and if it was my front yard and it was right over there and it wasn't a street, I'd probably utilize it too, so.
168 feet.
Thank you. In length?
Have there been discussions with the neighborhood?
We've gotten a lot of calls, and we fielded the calls, my staff, my planners, and me. But, and this may sound counterintuitive coming from an attorney who does mostly entitlement work, but I prefer to have an organized group of people to deal with. And now I've got that IDs of the folks that I know have definite interest in vested rights. So there have been a lot of discussions, there's been a lot of talk, there's been a lot of questions asked, but now it seems like I've got a core I can deal with. Deal with, talk to.
I would just express the concern that you've got an older neighborhood without upgrades. You're going to attach it to a new neighborhood with upgrades. I was persuaded by their concerns about safety and increased traffic through their neighborhood, and I was just wondering if you had considered any mitigating measures or efforts to work with the residents on ensuring that their safety is paramount.
Well, absolutely. Be pleased to do that. We've got 2 weeks to do that beginning tomorrow, so be happy to do that. But I think we've got their names and addresses and contact information. You did? You? Okay. Ms. Vasquez has them.
Okay, that's my questions.
Well, with that said, is there any benefit to holding this and having a conversation with the community about the proposed development and what type of mitigation measures might be appropriate under these circumstances?
If you think that's in the best interest, we feel like we can accomplish that within 2 weeks, but I tend to feel like as a planning commissioner for this district, you may have your ear closer to them than do I. So if that's your suggestion, then contractually we're not hampered by it, but we'd like to move faster. But if you think a hold would be instructional and meaningful, well, by golly, we'll make it. So even if it's just 2 weeks.
Thank you. Let me ask the individuals that came up and spoke, are you open to having a conversation with the applicant about their plans for development? Is that a yes?
Do you think that could happen in 2 weeks, or do you need another month?
I would say another month. I would say another month. I'm sorry.
If we're going to have dialogue, it
Excuse
really
me.
needs to be on the
Correct.
record. Yeah.
If I could have somebody come up from that group, please. Thank you. I apologize for that.
I would like to, my name is Lori Heron. I would like to ask that the 2 weeks be extended to a month to allow us all to work out our schedules and calendars to have a meeting. 2 weeks is pretty short.
I think that's reasonable. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you,
I
sir.
appreciate that. With that said, then I would offer up a motion to hold Z65 of 2022 until our December 6th public hearing. That's my motion. Second?
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right.
And
I'm sorry.
can we clarify that that's for the purposes of permitting the parties to?
Yes, I'm sorry, for the purposes of permitting the applicant and the applicant's representative to meet with the neighborhood to discuss mitigation measures that would hopefully minimize the impact related to.
And just so I'm saying something I think is true, that would also extend the time for us to file any additional things that we didn't meet the deadline. In other words, a traffic study and things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
So anything that comes out of those meetings.
That is correct.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
All right. Second, still good? All right, call the question. All right, that passes 4-0. On to our next case, sir.
And Mr. Vice Chair and Board, the next case has a companion special land use permit with it. Would it be the board's desire to hear both cases together and make separate motions on both at the end?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, rezoning case Z66 of 2022, ADP Terra Mill LLC, request rezoning from RA to CRC for a climate-controlled self-storage facility in land lot 936 of the 17th District. The property is located on the west side of Terra Mill Road and on the south side of Delk Road. Together with its special land use permit, SLEP 14 of 2022, ADP Terra Mill LLC, request a special land use permit for a climate-controlled self-storage facility in land lot 936 of the 17th District. The property is located on the west side of Terra Mill Road and on the south side of Delk Road. The applicant is present. Is there anyone here opposed to these two cases? Please stand up and raise your hand. One, okay. Let the record show there's one person here opposed. All those who wish to address the board, please come forward and be sworn in.
All right, Mr. Moore, you can state your name for the record. Appreciate it.
Sure. Good morning, Commission. My name is Kevin Moore, here on behalf of ADP Terrell Mill. LLC in this application for rezoning, as well as an application for a special land use permit for a climate-controlled self-storage facility. This property has a couple of unique features in terms of its overall location. It's located at the intersection of Terrell Mill Road and Delk Road. You can see it highlighted. It's currently zoned R80. This property is only 2.5 acres, so it's a small tract, 2.5 acres, zoned R80, located there at Terrell Mill and Delk. You see the large GC in red as one of the adjoining properties. That's a large public shopping center, if you're familiar with this area. Across the street is commercial uses of a bank, as well as a fast food restaurant. On Terrell Mill, though, as you come down Terrell Mill south from Delk Road, it turns residential with larger residential to the east. Then you have suburban condominiums and townhomes on the east side of Terrell Mill, proceeding down from Delk Road. So you can kind of see where this project's located. First and foremost, what you realize is the R80 designation is flat out spot zoning. Certainly R80 is not appropriate at this location. The proposal that we have made for it is now to delete our request to an O&I classification with a special land use permit for a climate-controlled self-storage facility at this unique location. It is NDR in your land use plan. We have, it certainly says that, and that's what a long time had thought, well, this 2.5 acres will just be residential here. This property and this property owner, whom I also have the fortune of representing over a year and a half ago, actually had the contract, had the property under contract for a residential developer to develop it for townhomes. It doesn't work. It's simply too small. It had it under contract for half as much almost. This is not a price point situation. This is a size situation. At 2.5 acres at this location, when you are adjacent to the public shopping center, when you are adjacent to the traffic that's generated at Delk Road at this intersection, at 2.5 acres, you simply cannot generate a site plan with sufficient number of units to really have an economically viable residential development. They tried. They truly tried. So it was ultimately terminated. And that's an important consideration. Has this been tried? Do you try to do this under the existing future land use map? And they have. The owners have, and a very reputable residential developer did, and it just simply doesn't work from an economic perspective. So what's being brought forward now is a self-storage facility, one that, while a commercial use, is one of the least intensive commercial uses that you can have. Without question, it produces so few trips, typically less than 10 trips per day, if that. That's on average, less than 10 trips per day. It can be done in a style, in an arrangement that's very responsive to the community's needs, and that's what's happened here. We've had ongoing discussions with the community and the community leaders here, both in the subdivisions adjacent to us and the community at large, and those have evolved over time, and there has been a good deal of changes that have been made. This final site plan, in fact, represents some of those changes that we have incorporated. Number one, you'll notice at the corner, as you see Delk Road kind of top left, at the intersection of Delk and Terrell Mill, we have identified a tree save area. There's some significant trees on this property, and specifically located there. We adjusted our site plan to accommodate a tree save area in that location at the request. In addition, you'll see that coming off of Terrell Mill, which is really the residential side of this property, what we have done is change how that looks from coming in from a site plan standpoint. We've moved all the parking, all the activity is on the commercial side, adjacent to the public shopping center to your left, as well as along Delk Road. What we've done is taken out parking, taken out activity along that stretch on Terrell Mill Road for this property. Again, intentional and as part of being responsive to comments that were made to us. Also, on the southern part of this property, on the bottom of your screen, is an expansive minimum 50-foot landscape buffer adjacent to the existing residential there that is significant in terms of both its width and the type of landscaping, both utilizing existing trees and landscaping to provide a visual screening of this proposed project. In addition, on our street frontage, which you'll see in a minute as well, what we have done by way of stipulations are likewise key to this overall plan. We have created and stipulated to street frontage treatment that'll include expansive landscaping, as well as the use of fencing with pillars so that you create a look. And that's really what we've tried to do through these discussions. We've received a lot of feedback and done a lot of work, this applicant has, in terms of being responsive and having real, true conversations with folks. What is it you care about? See what we can do about it, and have come back with that. And so we're trying to create a more residential appearance to this piece of property. We're doing that through landscaping. We're doing that through the fencing and the pillars, through the tree save area, and how this is oriented. We're also doing it by having key stipulations that we've agreed to. Number one is agreeing to full security for this site. It has access security, as well as cameras and so forth, as well as making and ensuring that the lighting for the facility is appropriate given where it is. And those are part of key stipulations. We've also agreed, as this applicant has, to more restrictive hours, both in terms of office hours and access hours for this facility than others, even nearby competitors. Ours are more restrictive, and that's a response directly to the input that we've had and the considerations in making sure that we were sensitive to our residential neighbors. In addition, we've agreed to very specific signage. If you've been by self-storage, you know what that signage looks like. It looks very commercial. We've agreed to tone that way back to remove moving LED type features. We've agreed to certain types of colors. We've agreed to gooseneck lighting to light our signage as opposed to backlit signage. Those are important conditions that you do not normally see with self-storage that we've agreed to here as part of this proposal, given the length and breadth of the discussions that we've had. Turning now, I think the really important part is the detailed renderings. This is not the first set of renderings we have done, full set by this applicant, showing the visual here from the main access, which is a right in, right out on Delk Road. This is just past the Publix, and what you're going to notice with these renderings is that the building looks somewhat residential, like it could be a townhome type building, and that's what's being achieved here, both with using overwhelming or primary brick as the exterior material, with the number of windows, as well as the relief that you're achieving through this design. You kind of see some faux type balcony elements as well. The roof line, again, has pitched elements to it all along, and it kind of varies so that you're not ending up with a box-looking commercial facility, but you're driving by, it looks a whole lot more like it's a residential type facility that both invites you into the neighborhood, but also recognizes that you're against Delk Road, a very busy divided highway at a signalized intersection in this location. And you can start to see the detail to which they have gone to be responsive, and I think that that has been an achievement of this applicant, and also achievement of this type of use for this location. As you can see, when we went back and we looked and we saw where it's located, access is not good here. It's a difficult access piece. Even residentially, access is not particularly one that's conducive to residential access even. But access challenge pieces like this that are sticking out on what should be a commercial corner, facing that level of traffic and signalized intersection, if it's challenged in this fashion, a climate-controlled self-storage facility, if done correctly, is an absolute ideal use from our perspective. From an intensity standpoint, from a traffic impact standpoint, this is monumentally less intensive than a residential use would be here. Monumentally less intensive in terms of what you can do from a buffer standpoint to the rear, and in terms of what you can do to the treatment along the frontage. What hurts this property from a residential standpoint actually benefits it if you use it for a use like this. Climate-controlled self-storage can be done in this type of fashion, and it's a testament to this applicant who has worked extremely hard with the community. We have had many, many discussions that have brought us to this point, and I think it's a good point. I think it's a point of pride for the community and for the county that you can have that level of conversation. You can have the back and forth in terms of having true conversations about what people care about, and then have an applicant respond in this manner. And I think it's quite the achievement. With these renderings, which are attached to our stipulation letter, we're not just going to substantially build it in this fashion. We've committed to build this project in this fashion. With these stipulations, which are in detailed nature, with these renderings and with the cooperation that we've had, we believe this is an excellent proposal that allows a piece of property to be developed and used appropriately given its surroundings. And we think with that, we would respectfully request your recommendation for approval to the Board of Commissioners. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll hear from the opposition. perfect timing.
Good morning. My name is Rudolph Arnstein. I live in Terra Mill Estate, 3103 Brookfield Road. I don't have so much of an opposition, but a concern in stormwater. From this development, we have a hill that runs downwards into four or five stormwater drains, which eventually transverses my property on Brookfield Drive. And looking at the corrugated pipe that drains across my property, I see a tremendous corrosion taking place. And I'm beginning to see erosion on my stream because of development and runoff. And I'm just concerned that things are just going to get worse with this development.
Okay.
That's my concern.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate that, sir. Thank you. Any other opposition? All right. This is in District 2, and Commissioner Anderson will lead our discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would I be able to, actually, I'll ask first the planning staff, John Peterson here, can you walk us through your recommendation on this case and some of the, that's one, and number two is, can you disclose if there's been any update on the Powers Ferry Corridor Master Plan, which I believe was to be updated maybe 2021, or if there's been any subsequent updates of that?
Okay, well, regarding the Powers Ferry Master Plan, I'm not sure about that question. I'm not sure if we have someone here from planning. No? We can get that answer for you, Commissioner Anderson, at a later date, but I'm not sure what the status of that is. Now, regarding the staff recommendation was to deny the request, and that was chiefly done, one, because of what's around us. You know, there's residential directly to the south and directly across Tillamook Road. The land use plan is medium-density residential, and I've been involved with a few zonings on this portion of Tillamook Road that's kind of in between Delk Road and Powers Ferry Road, and all the applications have come in have been for residential uses. Even on the other side of the road, we've had court cases to stop commercial from going down this part of the road. So the staff recommendation was to deny the request for the self-storage facility and just leave it as zoned, and maybe something coming in the future that meets the land use plan for it.
Thank you. And regarding the most recent submission of the site plan, I know the original submission here and the site plan that was attached to that had, I think, 5 variances, mostly around setbacks. With the latest version of the site plan, do some of those setback variances and concerns still go away? Are there any new variances?
Yes, there were 5 variances listed in the staff report.
Mm-hmm.
The first one had to do with FAR, which I believe is still a variance.
Right.
But the next 3 were setback variance, and the very last one was a landscape buffer variance. And, variances 2 through 5 go away now.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just wanted to ask, do any of my fellow commissioners have any questions of John, Mr. Peterson? Great, thank you. Can I have Carl Carver from Stormwater, please?
Carl Carver, Cobb County Stormwater.
Great. Hi, Carl. Can you walk us through, based on this site plan, the gentleman had expressed concerns about potential erosion that's occurring, and first off, are you aware of where the location that he referenced is relative to this site, and if there are any kind of impacts that are existing on that site in terms of where the actual downstream conditions are? Is that within an area that would be affected by runoff from this site today?
Correct, yes. As a part of my stipulations, I have included some very specific locations for downstream analysis to be included with the land disturbance permit hydrology study that was brought to my attention by some of the neighbors. It might have been that gentleman, I'm not sure. So in looking at the downstream and the Terrell Mill, as a part of the land disturbance permit, they'll have to do some evaluations of the drainage swell and the storm drain system to make sure that there's no impacts. The original site plan submitted didn't indicate stormwater management, but the current plan does. And it looks like it's going to be an underground system that will drain into the system within Terrell Mill Road.
Okay. Great, thank you, Carl. Do any of my fellow commissioners have any questions of Carl? Great, thank you, Carl. May I have Amy Diaz from DOT please come up?
Amy Diaz, DOT.
Hi, Amy.
Hello.
So, Amy, can you walk us through your recommendations, specifically around the movements onto Terrell Mill Road? And that's an area where there's been a number of, obviously you point out a number of issues with the southbound traffic that is coming down there. And can you speak to the recommendations that you've made for this site and whether they've actually been kind of addressed within this newest plan?
Yeah, so our recommendation was that they have right-in, right-out access only because of their location and proximity to the Delk at Terrell Mill intersection. They were agreeable to that to help their inward circulation. We recommended that they consider an additional right-in, right-out on Delk Road, and the most recent site plan does incorporate that.
Great, thank you. And for our benefit, has there been any studies in the past that informed the designation of this area as a medium-density residential that have looked at kind of the traffic impacts from programming residential use here? Granted, we're not coming forward with a residential use at this time, but do you have a sense? I know usually there's a rule of thumb trip generation metrics that would be, say, hey, X, Y, Z number of units would be supported here. If there were to happen, here's how many trips that would generate. For a site like this, just kind of doing the math, 2.5 acres, and then 5 units per acre is just going to give us, call it 13 units.
So to my knowledge, there's not a study exactly like what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Now, what does happen is the Community Development Planning Department does, basically a long-range planning for the various areas, and they use the land use map and the future land use map in assuming what kind of traffic is going to be in those areas. And there is a traffic component to those studies. But as far as somebody drilling down to the number of units in this particular area and calculating the traffic from that, I do not believe that is available.
Okay. Great. Thank you. And can you speak to the trip generation that you would expect from this particular use, given the number of units that are being contemplated here? Is that something where, what would be the level of analysis that you would need at this stage to become comfortable with?
So the typical unit of measurement that we use for trip generation for self-storage is actually square footage rather than the number of storage units they're going to have. So we would base it on that. Based on the code that was in in place before the most recent amendment. They did trigger a traffic study because they were over 50,000 square feet. They would no longer trigger under the new code. So where that requirement is in our comments, it was acceptable to DOT if we didn't receive that until plan review, because it's not likely to have any bigger impact. When we had our applicant meeting with the applicant, I mentioned as long as they had right-in, right-out driveways only, that we would not anticipate this going on to a submittal to a full traffic study, even with the traffic in the area.
Okay. Great, thank you. Do my fellow commissioners have any questions?
Thank you.
Great, thank you. And may I have the applicant, Mr. Moore? Please come on up.
Yes, Commissioner.
Great. Hi, Kevin. So, a couple questions for you. Can you talk a little bit about the marketing effort around this property? How long that's been in place? I know you mentioned that there was a prior effort underway.
Mm-hmm.
Was that part of the current marketing effort? There's obviously a sign up there right now, so it is a listed property.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about whether that initial offer was received as part of this listing process, or if it was an unsolicited offer? Was it a broadly marketed process, and the kind of the level of interest that you kind of engaged and helped drive to the conclusion around the unsuitability of residential?
Sure. So this property is now in an estate. The lady and family that had lived here for a very, very long time and owned this property for a very, very long time. And she was a great community member and well regarded by her neighbors. She's passed away, and so beginning around 3 years ago, the property was being actively marketed, not unsolicited. She had received unsolicited offers for the last 50 years, given where this is located. But this was actively marketed. And those marketing efforts came forward with two types of offers. One was a residential offer, more than just one, but there was a good residential offer from a very well-regarded residential developer that has done residential developments here in Cobb County, and specifically in East and Southeast Cobb County. And there was also an offer from a very well-known gas and convenience store company, also headquartered here in Cobb County, for this intersection, for significantly more. Based on the discussions that we had at the time, it was decided that to go with the residential offer. It was put under contract. Residential developer spent a good deal of money in due diligence and investigation, ultimately decided to terminate based upon the fact, like I said earlier, this is a small tract at 2.5 acres. Like you said, it's 13. Really, it's going to be somewhere between 10 and 12 units, townhome units that you could do under the future land use plan. Even if you went above 5 units per acre, you're still looking at something that is in the neighborhood of 12 to 15 units at best. That's then taking the 2.5 acres, leaving very little in terms of buffers. It's exposed on one side to Publix, on another side to Delk Road and the commercial there. So it becomes a highly exposed piece of property for residential. And number one. Number two, as I explained, the access to it is difficult. Number three, simply put, by the time you develop a piece of property at 2.5 acres, you simply don't have enough units to make it economically viable. Under the future land use plan, or if we went higher, it just is not, it doesn't make for enough of a project to make it economically viable. And that wasn't a function of price for the land, like it is sometimes. It was a function of development costs and what can really come out of 2.5 acres. And all of those factors put together. So that contract was terminated, and it went back on the market actively again. And again, we had a very well-known convenience store operator based and headquartered here in Cobb County, still wanting to come forward. But ultimately, this was put under contract because we felt it was actually a very viable use for the property, and one that we could really work with the neighbors. That was why.
Thank you. Thank you for the background on it.
Sure.
And so what I'm trying to get to is, I think, so our MDR is 2.5 to 5, right? So,
Correct.
So we're talking about a range from basically 6 units up to 13, roughly. And, well, while I certainly can understand the challenges around R80 as a designation, I guess the question we as a commission, and I specifically am trying to get around is there another category that makes more sense but maintains the actual spirit of the MDR designation? So, when we look at the marketing question, I still am trying to figure out how, I guess, 6 units can't fit on this lot, which would be consistent with the future land use. I'm not a site engineer, so it's, and I understand also that, this is designated within the Powers Ferry Plan as, in addition to the master plan, a kind of village concept, which is, designated as a residential that's consistent with the land use plan. So so the next question I jump to is, if viability on the residential side is something that, we're trying to figure out, is that a long-term outlook? And so that jumps to the basis for storage. Has there been any, so as someone who's done market studies in the past, usually a storage market study can be as simple as just looking at units in the area or looking at 3-mile rings and understanding the mix of owners and renters or psychographics around those users, things like that. You can get very detailed. Has there been any market study that has, that you can share or talk to us about, which has specified, hey, this A makes sense in terms of they're meeting a gap, and B, this number of units and configuration of 5.5s, 5.10s, a number of those also makes sense? Is there anything like that that's been done to kind of help us buy into the, hey, there's a future demand need here that's not met by supply?
Sure. Now, there was 2 questions, so I'll answer both in that order. First, there's not a physical limitation for putting 6 or 12 residential units on here. You can fit it. You can put this. There was not a physical limitation. We could zone it UC. We can go up urban condominium. Let us have 50 units an acre. Now we're talking. But I don't think that fits in either. Again, the economic viability of what would be acceptable as residential from a zoning or future land use standpoint, it doesn't work. And that was borne out by a residential developer in the hottest real estate market that we've had in 30 years, couldn't make it work. So that's where it comes from an economic viability standpoint. From a storage standpoint, yes, this particular company, this is an LLC they formed specifically for this project, but it's an affiliated company of Shamrock Building Systems, who is one of the foremost self-storage builders and developers here in Cobb County, and has developed and built self-storage facilities in the immediate area, okay, and is intimately familiar with the market and has conducted its own, and there is more than enough market capacity. This is a fantastic location for them and a fantastic market for them. Like I said, they have intimate familiarity because they've done them right here and done it recently. So it's not like there's an overabundance of them. The market is very, very strong for it, and especially when they can do it in the quality that they're proposing here.
Yeah. And that's really helpful to understand. I think the just general question is, I would love to see that market study and understand that. Just 4 years ago, COVID has changed a lot of these markets, and it's been really a boon for a lot of sectors, self-storage in particular. But it was also a sector that you read any analyst report 3 or 4 years ago was being deemed as oversupplied. So markets change, right? Lumber costs a year ago were 60% higher than they are now. So I think when I think through these, I try to think about, as a group that can't really consider economics on a specific deal, I look at kind of, is there a long-term outlook that really necessitates this? And I guess trying to see if a market where we had lumber prices at historic peaks a year ago and it made residential not pencil then means that structurally there's a site where residential will never pencil.
Correct.
And so that's really where my line of questioning comes from.
Sure. we'd be happy to provide the market information, and they can provide that to you. This is based on my understanding from when it was under contract in the hottest real estate market, residential real estate market we've seen in 30 years in my lifetime doing this, that it didn't pencil. So that tells me it's not going to pencil going into the future. And it is one of the factors that you consider in zoning, one of the actual factors, and that is the viability of the property for either its current zoning or what it shows on the future land use map is actually one of your factors. It's one of the stated factors in the code and one of the stated factors under Georgia law. Now, I know the economics of one versus another, not necessarily, but its viability and how it's been marketed and whether that's been successful actually is one of the factors. But as far as economically from a market standpoint, this proposal, we can absolutely provide that information and support it very well. Be happy to.
Yep. And one other question I had was on the extent of community outreach. I've heard of, just from talking with a lot of people, that I think we always like cases where there's been an active and proactive community outreach, and so
me too.
Certainly commend you and your applicant on the outreach that has been conducted and some of these changes that you've made and providing the detailed elevations. Can you speak to any of the kind of the groups that have come on board to support this and some of the groups that you've met with, just so we can kind of have an inventory of who you've spoken to? Because I think the products that you've shown sound like a very collaborative effort, which is always to be applauded. So would love to understand how that process went about and who you've spoken to so far, and who might you be looking to still speak to?
Sure. So we'll start with Powers Ferry Alliance, which is an overarching community group for this area. And also then drill down even more specifically, our two most immediate neighbors, who I thought were extremely important. Number one is Cobblestone, which is the one that's directly to our south, that residential development. We've had engaged in extensive conversations with them, as well as Mill Ridge subdivision, which is across Terrell Mill from us. So that's where their access or their entrance onto Terrell Mill is directly across from this property. And so we had extensive conversations with both of those very specific homeowner groups, as well as the overall Powers Ferry Alliance community group. And it went extremely well. And by that, I mean, from my standpoint, there were great responses, conversations, discussions about what people cared about. We were able to then respond to that and get comments on what we were responding to and further comments and really go through this. I think you can see by the response today, you would think if this was such a problem that there'd be a huge crowd here of opposition, knowing this particular area as you do and who lives here, okay? I'm not going to speak for those groups as to whether they support or not. I can only speak to say that they have not stood here in opposition based on what we have provided in those extensive conversations, which I give a credit to them for insisting on being engaged and providing those responses, and I give credit to the applicant for being responsive.
And I have just one more question before I turn it over to my fellow commissioners here. Just unit mix. I think this is generally storage units really depend on residential ownership versus residential rental. I think the unit square footage was, I think, 123 square feet per unit, which when I look at the 6 other facilities on Powers Ferry, it's a much smaller unit mix that caters more towards what would normally be an area that has a bunch of apartments around it.
Right.
And again, given that most of the storage cases we've heard have not been in MDR, they've been in, CACs or NACs or RACs. It seems like the unit mix and the FAR are pretty dense with small units that are designed for kind of a little bit of a more of a renter type cohort and market. So would love to, again, maybe this is something you address in the market study, but
sure, be happy to.
That's something where ideally I think that unit mix either comes down or is maybe reconfigured to more align with some of the needs of this market. It seemed like that's more of a design consideration, but again, I think that's all informed by a market study, which I put a lot of weight on. Just again, having done them in the past and seen them in the past. But that's more of a comment than a question. But with that, I'll open it up to my fellow commissioners if they have any questions.
When you showed the visual of the appearance of the complex, it looks very nice. Has there been consideration of it being consistent with the other commercial activity that looks like it's adjacent?
In terms of its appearance?
Yes.
Well, the comment has been make it the opposite of what the adjacent commercial looks like.
Right.
So,
Well, maybe you
because
want to
the
update.
adjacent
yeah.
commercial is the GC, is Publix, and you have Zaxby's, and you have a bank, very, like you would think, okay? And so the idea that we've received and we've worked very hard on is to, in fact, depart from that completely so that it really has a more residential, town-homey looking neighborhood look to it, gooseneck lighting, the materials, the reliefs, and the designs. So it was intentionally departing from the adjacent commercial.
Okay, it does look very nice.
Looks great, thank you. Wish I could take credit for it, but they did a wonderful job with it.
Yeah, I just second that comment regarding the attractive appearance, and you more so than almost anybody else in the room are familiar with other instances where there's been more community opposition to the notion of a self-storage.
Yes.
Extremely recently, we're aware of that. So are you familiar with the interplay, or can you discuss the interplay between the Powers Ferry Alliance and the other planning groups that would have input in coming up with the Powers Ferry Master Plan? I just want to make sure that we're not stepping on some toes here.
I can only speak to it anecdotally because I'm not a part of the Powers Ferry Alliance. I've worked with them and their folks very often in the past, and I'm aware of, in general, that there's some things that have gone on that they've looked at in terms of that corridor study, but I can't speak to it specifically and answer that question. So
Yep.
it's just, it wouldn't be my place. It would need to be a Cobb County planner or somebody from the Alliance.
Okay. And I apologize, it's just something I'm not familiar with. I just hate for us to be deemed to be stepping on toes as somebody who worked very hard on some master plan, but yet it seems like you have made efforts to reach out to the community and
very much so.
secured a lot of support from the community. And I do note again, just one person showing up with concerns less so to your project than just about a stormwater concern. So I appreciate that.
Any other questions? Okay. So at this time, I think for me, the couple things on the positive end, the level of community outreach, the creativity around the elevations, the responsiveness have all been really positive, certainly things that are very much always what we ask for. I still would need more certainty around the market demand for this, and I mean long-term demand. That's something where, again, we are trying to plan for 24 years out, not 24 months. And so that's something where, as we look through these land uses, having worked closely in the business, vacancy and rent metrics today can, be good, but not necessarily indicative of a true long-term appropriateness, or even supply and demand matching. So while I think there are a lot of good and positive elements here, my motion would be to hold this, and so that we can receive a market study that gives a little bit more conviction around the need for storage at this particular location. And then the second thing would be, it'd be helpful to understand if as part, either, in addition to that study, any kind of analysis you can provide around the lack of viability for residential on this site at 6 units, which would be consistent with the MDR designation, existing land use. Certainly would be something that would obviously not be consistent with the current zoning, but does at least help us understand the basis that we're comparing this to. So my recommendation would be to hold this for 30 days.
Second?
Sorry, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
We did.
And that's just for the zoning case, right? We're going to do a separate motion for the SLUP after this.
Yes,
Okay.
that's for the, yes, zoning for,
Okay.
sorry, I'm distracted by the Tootsie Rolls up here. There, someone had Halloween apparently in the days. Yes, for Z66, that's correct.
Okay.
Motion and a second. Question? Call the question. Motion passes 4-0.
Thank you.
And so I would make another motion for SLUP 14, SLUP 14, 2022, that be held for 30 days as well.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Call the question. Motion passes 4-0. I'd like to suggest we take just really just a 5-minute break if we can. We only have 2 cases after this, if that's okay. We'll reconvene at 10:50, if that's okay. For our zoning hearing, November 1st, 2022, picking up with zoning case Z68.
All right, rezoning case Z68 of 2022, the Revived Land Group LLC, request rezoning from GC to FST for a townhome community in land lot 45 of the 18th District. Property is located on the south side of Veterans Memorial Highway, west of Allen Road. The applicant is present. Is there anyone here opposed to rezoning case Z68? Two. Let the record show there's two people here opposed. All those who wish to address the board, please come forward to be sworn in.
All right. Thank you, Kevin. If you say the name for the record.
Thank you, Commissioners. I'm Kevin Moore here, representing Revive Land Group in this application for rezoning for a piece of property that's 8.7 acres located off of Veterans Memorial Highway. This 8.7 acres on Veterans Memorial, even though it's not in an intersection, is actually all zone general commercial. And if you, look around Veterans Memorial and look and see up and down that corridor, it's what I call legacy zoning. That is, it was a result of 1972 zoning map being adopted, the fact that Veterans Memorial was developed out prior to that time in the 40s and 50s and 60s as strip commercial, going all the way down Veterans Memorial. And so this piece is actually zone general commercial, even though it is on this side of Veterans Memorial, it's got residential adjacent to it in certain cases, especially to the rear. But this property is also in a neighborhood activity center. You can also see the zoning here, and you'll see what I mean. We've got it highlighted as general commercial, and you can see kind of its orientation with the other commercial categories that are surrounding this property, and then the residential that's surrounding this property. So on your future land use map, as a neighborhood activity center, this property is slated for some type of commercial development per your future land use plan. But in looking at it and also looking at what's happening along Veterans Memorial and what's been happening, especially of a more recent vintage, and that is there's been somewhat of a renaissance that has started. It's not going on right now. It started where there's been residential projects that have come along off of Veterans Memorial, one of which is a Revive Land Group project that's off of Veterans Memorial at Bonanza Trail, where you've had new residential coming in for the first time in a very long time that's just sorely needed as part of, I think, an overall vision for Veterans Memorial that says, let's get away from this legacy kind of strip one-off uses of commercial uses that really have gone well past their lifetime in terms of actually, A, serving the community, or B, providing a true quality service to the community. Also, you have these commercial uses that just don't seem to have a general plan to them. They're just one after the other. And here, this, we believe, is part of that renaissance along Veterans Memorial. It's happening on Mableton Parkway as well, where we can have quality residential for the first time coming in a very, very long time that'll help do two things with that corridor. Number one, transform completely the look as you travel down Veterans Memorial. Number two, transform the people that are there that can demand the quality improve of the commercial services and that the quality improve of the residential offerings. That's happening, and it's going to continue to happen, and that's what this application is bringing forward with you and to you is a proposed townhome development. What we had put in last Monday is a site plan that is shown on your board now. That's got a couple of critical things, and I want to highlight that for you. Number one, on Veterans Memorial, and this is part of our extensive discussions with the Mableton Improvement Coalition that have been going for quite some time. Those units that are on Veterans Memorial, you'll notice they're off of Veterans Memorial. Those are front-facing or rear-loaded units. Again, continue that thought process of how do we change how it looks along Veterans Memorial. Then when you do a project like this, you change how it looks. You don't see that. This is going to continue those efforts. These are front-facing, rear-loaded units. We're going to have tremendous landscaping and walls along and fencing along Veterans Memorial that are going to bring those elements in so that you see the high quality of residential here. So that's a critical component as well. Now going to the rear of this property, and you'll see the cul-de-sac at the bottom of your screen. We have an adjacent neighbor that has a very nice home there. What we've provided for there is a minimum 25-foot buffer that'll be fully landscaped. You can also see that that house, the one that's on the bottom left, is that last townhome building or that townhome. It's just a side that faces out towards that property line, so it's not a back or a rear of the townhomes. It faces out. You got that cul-de-sac that's there, and we have a full 25-foot buffer that's located there. As part of that buffer, I want to just explain to you kind of that visual for him, because we've really tried to address that. You can see this is a cross-section profile that we've completed. On the left is the residence of the neighbor, Mr. DeLuca. And you can see the elevation change because it sits well below this property and the final grade elevation for this property. You can see there's existing tree growth that's there, and then we'll have our planted tree buffer. And you really see that the height difference as well as the difference in distance creates a true visual buffer there. This is not a situation where this new development is going to be sitting on top of them. As proposed, these were, the house, from house line to house line, was about, call it 120 feet, okay, between the rear of his house and the rear of that proposed townhome. From property line to from the property line to the rear of that townhome was about 40 feet. And I'll come back to that in a minute. I also want to highlight for you the visuals that have been prepared here so you can see the type of fencing and monumentation and landscaping that will be along Veterans Memorial. And if you've driven down Veterans Memorial, this is not what you see, but this is what you can see if we can begin to insist upon this level of quality along Veterans Memorial for our residential developments, which you can see. And this is really what I was speaking to, is you can highlight how that looks, what that invites from a home ownership standpoint, what that invites from a view shed standpoint, and we think that's extremely important part of consideration for this. Now, we've continued to have these discussions primarily that have delved around that point I was making with the rear. We really want to make sure we protect, and we have had sensitivity towards protecting that rear neighbor and ensuring what that is, and a lot of it's been concerned about distance. And what I want to show you now is a plan. I was able to share it yesterday because we continue to work on this as we've had these discussions. And I want to turn to this plan, which we'll submit as of today. But it only changes one aspect, and I want to go to that to you. This plan, if you just look at it, you wouldn't hardly notice the difference between this plan and the other plan. And that's because it is generally the exact same plan in terms of its arrangement. But what it does is it shortens up where this cul-de-sac comes in here to create more distance between our activity and that shared property line for that homeowner. So what we're able to do is increase this distance to about 145 feet between the edge of this townhome and their house, which is here. So that increases by another basically 25 feet that distance, as well as the distance goes up to 65 feet between this property line and that first building, and enables us to have that, again, that full buffer. It actually provides a little more room for stormwater management area, which is critical here for him, but again, creates further distance. And we were able to accomplish that by this design change. Unfortunately, this design change costs the applicant 2 units. So this reduces it from 67 to 65 homes. And that's all it does. It increases that distance and decreases his unit count from 67 to 65, which we're willing and voluntarily doing. And I think it's important because this case has not been about density or numbers of units. When we've had the discussions with the community, with Mableton Improvement Coalition, it's been about making sure we try to address the various component parts. Let's address how it's going to look along Veterans Memorial. Check. Big checks. Let's make sure we're addressing arrangement. Let's make sure we look at this in the rear and make sure that we take care of that owner and address his concerns. Check. We've done that. We've been able to provide for a 25-foot buffer. We've been able to provide now with this plan even further distance than had proposed at the cost of 2 units for this applicant, Revive Land Group. We have also been able to now have provided and gotten checked off. We've done a full stream delineation. You see along the right-hand part of this portion of the property, the bottom southeast corner, which is the bottom right, there's a small stream that starts there that was determined by the environmental engineers. That's been checked off and approved by Frank Gibson of Cobb County Stormwater Management. There's a drainage ditch that comes off of Veterans Memorial along that same side, but that's not an actual state water there. It's a drainage off of Veterans Memorial, but it's been checked as well. All of that meaning we've taken into consideration, and why I bring that, we were asked about it. Did you do this? Has that been done? Yes, check. And the point being that this applicant has gone through those things and ensured that if there's been an issue that's been identified, how do we address it? Well, we address it by making sure the proper study's done. We address it by losing 2 units and offering a new plan that specifically addresses that concern. Again, we think and respectfully request your recommendation of approval to the board in concert with staff. Thank you.
All right, now we'll hear from the opposition.
Good morning. My name is Robin Meyer, and I'm the co-chair of the Mapleton Improvement Coalition Zoning Committee. Our recommendation to you on this application is that you recommend approval, but with some very specific conditions. Specifically, we're concerned about 2 items, the site plan and the creek along the eastern property line. First of all, we agree with Mr. Moore that this is a great use for this property. The commercial days of Veterans Memorial have peaked. There's far more demand in our community for single-family and multifamily homes than there are for more commercial development. So we think this is a good use for this property, and we would like to see development happen here along these lines. The site plan issues, though, are twofold, really. First has to do with the buffers. The staff analysis for the site plan was done based on an FST application, which has 10-foot landscape buffer requirements. So it's not identified in the staff analysis that at RM8, the applicant is essentially asking for a variance along the western property line from that 25-foot requirement to the 10-foot requirement. There is an existing home that you can see on your screen now that is very close to the property line, and with only a 10-foot buffer, we'll have a townhome literally in their side yard. The landscape buffer is also insufficient to protect the DeLuca's home. Mr. DeLuca will be the next speaker, so I'll let him show you the photos from his home and explain that more specifically. It's our suggestion that both units 30 and 31 on the original site plan that was filed should be removed or moved. And it was our suggestion to try to rotate them 90 degrees that led to yet another site plan modification, which I don't think you've seen, but which Mr. Moore provided to us a couple of weeks ago. I'm sorry, I believe last week. We call this, rather eloquently, I think, the square corner plan. What it does is rotate those 4 townhomes and makes them other changes to accommodate that, and bring those and eliminate the need for that dead-end street and that cul-de-sac. We think this is a better plan because we reduce the impervious surface. It preserves the unit count for the developer. He doesn't have to lose any units. It moves those units away further from the DeLuca property. And it retains better distribution of guest parking than the plan that you have seen today, both of the plans that Mr. Moore showed you. It probably doesn't meet DOT standards. However, we would urge you to look specifically at exactly what DOT comments are on a plan like this, and see if there is some balance to be had. We certainly respect the professional opinions of our friends at DOT. They're concerned for safety and good pedestrian safety, vehicular movement, but those standards should be just one aspect of the decisions you make. It's not uncommon to have other standards waived, such as buffer requirements from time to time. So let's look at why it is that we really have just that one option for that dead-end street, which is that very large cul-de-sac, which is the biggest piece of the intrusion into the DeLuca's sightlines. That corner plan is just a concept plan. Obviously, it would need a little bit of work, and we hope that that can be done. The other issue that has impact on the site plan, but is really an issue in and of itself, has to do with stormwater. And for us, the big question is this creek. Is it a creek or is it a ditch? If it's a creek, then it needs buffers. If it's a ditch, well, I'm not sure what you do with the ditch. The site plan says that it's a ditch. We've heard Mr. Moore say that it's a ditch. The GIS map shows it as a stream. And my common sense says it's a stream. I've seen it from the DeLuca's property. I've seen it from the property immediately to the right of that red arrow. When it rains, water runs in it. So it seems to me that it's as much a stream as it is some other depressions in the ground through which water runs when it rains. It is this ditch or stream or whatever it is handling runoff from Veterans Memorial, which, as we all know, highways, roads have no detention. All those storm drains along the curb do is collect up all that water that we're driving through, run it under the sidewalk, put it in a pipe, and then let it loose. And that water, you'll see from Mr. DeLuca's presentation, is coming his way. So we support this application, but we would very much like the site plan to make some significant improvements so that everyone can have this be a win situation. Thank you.
And my name's Louis DeLuca, I'm 194 Edwards Drive. I want to thank Mr. Hughes and Carver for coming out and actually looking at the property, and hopefully I can use this thing properly. Okay. So my two concerns are water management and my view shed and privacy. You've seen this one before, so I'm not going to waste time on it, but here is a story that I think needs to be told, and that is that I have water entering my property from the left side of the top there from the proposed project area. I have water entering my property from the top right where it comes in from Veterans Memorial. It then overflows my driveway when we have a big rain. It comes through and I can't get out of my house. I'm in an island. The third one is that we have a culvert this big that goes under the driveway, under the bridge, that allows the three houses on that side to get anywhere. We're trapped. I mean, we literally are trapped if that should get washed away or eroded or any other thing. And then fourth, I've got some water coming from another neighborhood upstream that enters on my property, and I've got erosion from all of this. So just as an illustration, this is not even on a GIS map or anything. It's just a ditch that drains on my property that starts at the corner where I said it starts at the bottom left of their property. This is what it looks like on a good rain without any hard surfaces upstream. This is my driveway. Right there, I'm standing, my feet are in the water, about a foot of water right there running across my driveway, and on a dry day, you see it on the left there. That's what it looks like. So 99% of the time, it looks like what's on the left. But that 1 or 2% of the time, this is what I live with. And I get massive erosion on my property from this. Here is just a sign of what kind of erosion we have. That's me standing at the bottom of a 14-foot ditch that is labeled a creek or stream that they've labeled as not a stream. And then that's Mableton Improvement Coalition standing on top of the ditch in the other part of that picture. And then this is what you see on that same rain that caused the other thing. I've only done this once in 8 years, stand out there in the rain taking pictures. But it's literally Niagara Falls coming from uphill into my property. This is a weir that I built because we have such large chunks of wood coming downstream in this non-stream event that, you can see it on the left side there, 6 foot long, 2.5 foot diameter log. There was a number, there was like 30 of them that came downstream. I stop it there so it doesn't jam up the culvert that's not even on my property downstream, so I can get, so I can then pull them out and burn them or whatever. But you can see what it runs like. And this is a view from my house, sitting at my breakfast table, looking out, and you see, if you look really close, you see that ladder with the gray tarp on it? That is at 122 feet from my back window, from the house, and at 28 feet, which is the height of a 3-story building. And you can see what I'm going to look at, but to make it easier to see, this is what it looks like scaled with Unit 31 sitting there. Now, granted, they've removed a unit or two, so the impact on my view shed is not going to be massively impacted, but by 20 feet.
Excuse me, we've exhausted the 10 minutes, but I'd like to give you at least another couple of minutes, if it's okay with the rest of the commissioners.
I only have 2 more slides.
Okay.
So here is what you've seen already today. I'd like to show you what the accurate version of this looks like. This is the alleged view I'll have. Well, you see the little blue? That is to scale what the sizes of these buildings in ratio will look like. The other thing is that forest that sits in that 122 feet between me and them, here's what the forest really looks like. This is my view from the back window again. That pine tree is my property line. I have 2 big trees between me and the property line. There's nothing to block my view, not like that illustration. So that's it. I appreciate the indulgence for the extra minute, but I'm very emotional about it. This is, we've lived there 8 years. We have a very secluded area, and this is going to trash the value of my property, going to trash the value of my life, of what I have to look at every day. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeLuca. Appreciate that. That concludes our public hearing.
Mr. Chair, so if we provided opposition additional time, we need to provide the applicant the same amount of time, which is about 1 minute and 10 seconds.
Thank you. Kevin?
Two quick points I want to reiterate. I'll let Mr. Carver speak to the stormwater, but that stormwater coming off of Cobb County's road, I'd be happy to represent Mr. DeLuca if he'd like to make a claim. Number 2, as it relates to the view shed, that's why we have gone through what we've done to increase that distance and increase it again and lose 2 units to increase it again. But I think primarily the other thing to keep in mind here is this property is zoned general commercial and a neighborhood activity center, okay? We would have double the impervious surface as a commercial development, and we would have a commercial development adjacent to him in his backyard, as opposed to what we're proposing, which is just simply residential with a nearest townhome, which is just a home at that point, 160 feet away from his house. And I think those are important considerations. We have respected his privacy and have respected his view shed and gone well beyond what any other reasonable application would see here, given that we're in a neighborhood activity center. I cannot say that enough, going back to your land use plan questions. Thank you.
Okay. Actually, if you could just stay there, Kevin, because I've got questions for you at this point. And sorry, this is in District 4, so I'll lead the conversation on this case. The original application was for FST. Obviously, at some point, it transitioned to RMA.
I thought it was the opposite. But I'd have to, I can pull, I just don't have it right with me. But regardless, yes. we switched categories.
Okay, so I wanted to confirm it, I guess, when that happened, and then I think the opposition already highlighted the buffer requirement for what's on the western side of the property being really, I think y'all are showing this 20 or 10 feet now, but it should be 25 feet. And given the close proximity to the single-family home that's on there, on the adjoining property, is that something that y'all could take a look at in terms of adjusting so that at least that buffer could be expanded?
We'd be happy to. I think, I just want 2 points. We switched categories it didn't change the site plan. When you get to FST and RM8 as categories, for doing a townhome development like that we've been doing, that you have seen, there's no difference in your site plan. There's just a difference in what your potential setbacks or buffers may or may not be. And so if you do it as one, you'll have this set of variances. If you do it as the other, you may have a few variances one way or the other. So initially, we didn't need a variance there. When we switched to the category, because that was more acceptable from what it shows on the map standpoint, is why we now have an issue there. Secondly, I believe that adjacent house only needs a 10-foot buffer, given what it's used for. And that's all I'll say about it.
Is there a reason you believe that?
Just how it's used and so forth. And so that property is not going to be a house for very long. It's adjacent to LI on one side. It's adjacent to general commercial on this side, and this is hopefully a development. It should be brought in at some point as something else. And I just think that that's why we've done it this way, but it's one that I can certainly have our folks take a look at, see if that can be expanded some more.
Okay. This is just a general comment. I certainly applaud you and your client for working with the community. I think y'all, at least based on some conversations I've had, emails I've seen, have been willing to really work with the community to make adjustments to the site plan. One other thing I did want to note, as I looked at the site plan, and I think it's across all 3 different ones I've seen, is the distribution of the guest parking. Is that something that we could revisit? Because it's all stuck up there in the northeast portion of the site. And I'm just from a practical standpoint.
Sure.
What are we talking about? People transversing all the way from the southeastern portion all the way up to the northeast, you know?
Sure. So can I show you and explain why that is? I think it'll actually go to Robin's point, or Ms. Meyer's point. All right, this site plan, like you said, it's been shown. There's a guest parking area here. We also have parallel guest parking here and parallel guest parking here. But yes, it predominantly has guest parking here with some distributed. That's not how the site plan has always looked. We did not have this small parking lot initially throughout our plan. We had expanded parallel parking here, expanded parallel parking in the cul-de-sac here, as well as you approached these intersections here and here. And as a result, we were able to avoid having any kind of little parking lot up in here, and it was distributed throughout the entire plan. Sorry. What happens, and this is a DOT standard, and in reviewing their standards, essentially, as you have intersections like here and here and here, as intersections here and so forth, parallel parking has to have a certain separation from those locations, even on an internal arrangement such as this. And by the time you start to meet those distance requirements for where even parking can be, according to the DOT standards, you just start losing areas available for guest parking. And that's why you'll see it, and you've seen it before, little small parking lots that are dumb, frankly, from a impervious surface standpoint, from a design standpoint. Nobody wants to see that, but that's the only way you can meet those DOT standards. Likewise, when you get to the cul-de-sac, having parallel spots in the cul-de-sac, you can do it, but you have to have a extra large cul-de-sac to accommodate the turning radius requirements for DOT, which eliminates them, especially when you're trying to minimize where this cul-de-sac is and the distance to that property line. So those factors resulted in us putting this lot here. So that's why you end up with this types of design, is because the DOT standards force you to that design. And DOT has its reasons, but you end up with those design choices because of that.
Okay. And then one other question, just a point of clarification for me at least. I think one of the conceptual exhibits where you showed the landscape architecture, what it looked like on the front side of the property with the brick columns. I noted that y'all had, I think they're 20, I forget what the dimensions of the columns are, square columns, I think 24 inches or something like that. In between those, wrought iron, is it wrought iron?
Yes.
Or is it wood fencing?
It's wrought iron type fencing that we're placing in
because
between.
your site plan says decorative wood fencing, so if we could just make sure we could correct
Yeah,
that.
I remember. It's wrought iron type fencing.
Okay.
As it shows, you see the monument, which is brick, and then there's brick columns with the wrought iron type fencing. Just gives a better, sturdier look.
Yeah.
So that's why.
I just wanted to be sure we were consistent with the image you were showing and then what the note was on the site plan.
I think it was an old note, and it just never got changed.
Those are all the questions I have right now for you. I'm going to defer to my fellow commissioners here to see if they have any questions of you while you're here. No? Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. If I could have Amy Diaz come up.
Amy Diaz, DOT.
Hey, Amy. Just to confirm, Kevin described, when I was asking him about the guest parking evenly distributed, he referenced DOT standards.
Correct.
I just wanted to confirm that
Yes.
that is in fact correct.
Well, it's a DOT standard, but it's also a state law. When you get closer and closer to the intersection, state law is you have to have parking 30 feet away from a stop sign, a stop bar. So our standard is 50 feet, just trying to get those two cars that we talk about for like uninterrupted distance. So we do have a little bit further than state law, but it has a basis in beyond DOT requirements.
Okay. And then the other question I have is, I think it was affectionately referred to as the square corner plan. If we could, Cornelius, if you could pull that up, the square corner plan. I wanted to look, that was from Mick's presentation, I believe. That one, thank you. So I know, whoops. Thank you. So I know the applicant prepared this plan as a way to try to mitigate some of the concerns that the adjoining property owner had with respect to runoff and vistas and views from his property to the adjoining property. And you see there, obviously, the connection there, basically the cul-de-sac's been eliminated. It's been suggested that that doesn't meet DOT standards. I wanted to confirm the accuracy of that and then why it doesn't meet those standards.
So that is correct. We don't allow, however you want to call it, the square corner or the 90-degree corner without a curve. So there's a couple of reasons for that. From a maintenance point of view, corners like that gather trash. They have difficulty with water. If there's a curb line, water will pool up in a corner if you have those there. But most critically for this location is the fact that cars have to have a curve to turn around. They can't make a 90-degree turn. And so you're going to have vehicles that are going inbound, so going from the southbound direction, turning into the development, going back to the east. They're going to have to encroach on the other lane because they can't follow their lane all the way to the 90-degree corner. The inside lane has a curve, like our typical lane design. But on the outside, they will have to encroach on that lane. So if two vehicles are passing at the same time, they're going to have to take turns. I mean, that's why it doesn't meet public road standards.
Would a hammerhead or knuckle be another option, or is that not even?
A hammerhead is also not to DOT standards, and that has to do with like school buses and things like that, the difficulties that they have with turnarounds and hammerheads. So DOT standards is for cul-de-sac only. For private roads, they can look at hammerheads because the fire department does accept those. But for DOT public roads, no.
Okay. All right. Any other questions, Commissioners? Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
I could have stormwater, please.
Carl Carver, Cobb County Stormwater.
Hey, Carl. It was referenced earlier that a stream delineation analysis had been prepared for this property. Can you share
Correct.
some
Yes,
of the results and how those results impacted your recommendations?
Correct. I did receive one yesterday from the environmental firm that made a delineation, and Frank Gibson of the Community Development Department also wrote a letter concurring with the findings. So I think they possibly do have the stream delineated properly, and then the upland areas would be considered a drainage ditch or swell. When I visited the site and understanding where some of the drainage was coming from, it was brought to my attention about a detention pond in the subdivision to the east. Since that time, we have been in contact with a developer that owns that detention pond, and they've been given notice to maybe clean it up because it's overgrown and it's not functioning right. So they've been given notice of that.
Okay. Okay. Any questions, comments? David?
Carl, can you so just to confirm, that area that you said was found to be just a swale, does that map onto the pictures?
No.
Okay. So the area that was shown, I guess, in the pictures before represents?
On the site plan, they do show where the stream is located with the buffers.
Right, okay.
And so to the north of that is not considered stream, by definition of a stream.
Okay. So I guess is anything that contributes to the neighbor's site to the south, that runoff that flows from this site be coming from that stream or from the ditch?
It comes from the ditch from Veterans Memorial. So
Okay.
when they're doing their land disturbance permit, they'll have to evaluate what's coming in from up north, Veterans Memorial, and what's across Veterans Memorial.
Okay.
They'll have to study the whole basin.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. Appreciate it. If I could have the opposition come back up, I think maybe both of you probably would be good. So you guys both obviously heard DOT's response with respect to their standards and why the cul-de-sac is needed. Based on that, and I'd had a conversation with the applicant and asked them to submit an updated site plan that reduced the number of townhomes by 2, pulled the cul-de-sac back, hopefully creating a little bit more separation and reducing the amount of impervious surfaces, while maybe not optimum for you in terms of the other plan that I think the square corner plan is that most recent plan something you feel like you could work with?
The square corner plan is vastly superior to what is presented. And I want to make sure everybody understands. I love the fact that it's going to be residential there versus commercial. And I think that my neighborhood up, on Veterans Memorial is crying for something to tag on to that veterinary there that looks so nice and wipe out the stuff on the side. I'm all for that. I just don't like the things I showed. But yes, the square corner is just a great solution.
Okay.
So,
Unfortunately, it seems to be a solution that doesn't meet DOT standards.
maybe there's a methodology of getting there that would maybe eases the corner a little, maybe it reduces the density a little bit more. There would seem there'd be some way of doing that. And also, the stormwater movement they did on the square corner, if you know that you've been out there, the elevation shifts involved on that back property, it not only comes down, but it crowns. And that drawing of where they put the new retention pond on the square corner plan is actually in a much more appropriate area to catch all that runoff that comes in on the left side that I showed you that comes running across my driveway. That is a much better location for and I'm not a stormwater engineer. I'm going to qualify that right now. I'll step on Carl's toes. But, I just common sense, it's downhill from the top, so.
Okay, all right.
Certainly the 3 units on the cul-de-sac are better than 4 units on the cul-de-sac. And I appreciate the explanation from Kevin and from Amy related to the feasibility of the square corner plan and the need, and the quote-unquote need for the cul-de-sac. If this development had private streets, then the cul-de-sac wouldn't be required by DOT. So I remain confused as to why a cul-de-sac has to be at this location. It's not a fire requirement. School buses don't typically drive into an area this small, and if they did, certainly they wouldn't drive into the cul-de-sac. There's a circle that they can drive around. So if it were a hammerhead and had the corners that Amy described, yes, trash can collect there, water can collect there, but there could be a storm drain there. I think we can count on these neighbors to pick up trash in their front yard. So I still do not understand why there needs to be a cul-de-sac there. I would also, it's our understanding I'll let Louis speak for himself, but it's our understanding that the home adjacent to this property on Veterans Memorial is occupied as a residence.
Peter lives there. I mean, there's somebody living in that house. Maybe he's referring to future use, which, hey, there's commercial on either side, and maybe he's going to sell and make a fortune in the future, but he was offered to buy, somebody offered to buy that from him, and he refused to sell. And this is hearsay, I'm just talking to him.
Yeah, and so, the house is very close to the street. I don't think the buffer needs to be in place for all the way along the property line, but if there could be just a little bit of relief for the, to get a little bit past his house so that there is not development right up to virtually the side of his house. It still seems to, if the state requirement is 30 feet from an intersection for parallel parking, then I think that we should be able to consider 30 feet from an intersection here. I mean, the location of this parking is so undistributed that parking lot's going to be unused, and except for the homes, visitors to the homes near it. And so there will be parking on the street. I mean, if you or I were going to visit the folks who live at that cul-de-sac, are we going to park up on Veterans Memorial and walk through the neighborhood? There are 6 parking spaces along that curve. I think we're down to 1 or 2 at the other location. So no, these people live on a cul-de-sac. We're going to drive down there and park in it. That's what that cul-de-sac is for if I'm just a regular visitor to this community. So this is better than the site plan that was filed, but I think the site plan can still be better.
Okay. Any questions, comments from my fellow commissioners?
I believe I heard the District 4 Commissioner suggest it could be beneficial to require an enhanced landscape buffer along the western property line. Do you have a position on that?
Mostly I have a position as to the width of the buffer, I would assume that it would be landscaped, yes.
Yes. So your position is what in that regard?
That on the western side, that there should be the full 25-foot buffer
Okay.
for a distance sufficient to protect that home, not the entire
length.
not the entire run.
So not the entire western boundary, but roughly, can you give us like unit numbers off this map where you think that ought to exist?
No, actually I can't, because I can't see where that house is on the site plan.
Would you know?
It sits very close to the front. So there was an aerial view.
Yeah, if we could look at the GIS map.
Look
we
at the
might-
GIS where
might
it
be able to
shows
get a
it.
guess.
You can see it sits very close to the road up there on the front. So the units very close to the road would seem to be the units impacted, the 4 units up there or something to that effect.
I mean, perhaps it could be described as,
Yeah, that's it right there.
right, perhaps it could be described as, 25 feet past the back corner of that house or some such thing.
Right, and the front entrance part for the landscaping plan will take part of that away automatically.
Okay, can we go back to the other map now? Or the plan?
And, while we're navigating the map, I mean, please let me reiterate that we do support this application. We just like to see it be the best it can be.
Understood. Understood.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. If I can have the applicant come up. So I think we're close.
Sure.
So the question I think I'm hearing is, under DOT standards, we're pretty locked in, but and obviously these right now are planned for as public streets. Are private streets something y'all would consider to give you a little bit more flexibility?
I mean, you've got a subdivision or a community here that's it's 65 homes or so. So you're starting to cut it really close from a private street standpoint, and the burden on the HOA. In District 4, we have now for a while, from the board, has insisted on public streets for that reason, because there's just not as much land, so you have smaller developments. That becomes the issue, I mean, from that standpoint. But yeah, I mean, I think Ms. Diaz pointed out exactly why, what the issue becomes from a site design standpoint, us doing that. So
let me ask you this. I guess the other thing, I'm just looking at the cluster of 3 townhomes to the west there, the last 3.
yes.
If we lost those and shortened the cul-de-sac even more, taking it down, I guess we're at 65 now, and take it to 62 and shorten the cul-de-sac. So that, well, I'm sorry, I'm designing here on the fly here.
Right.
And I'm not an engineer, so. Anybody have any other thoughts?
I can tell you, even if because having messed with this plan so much, as Ms. Diaz pointed out, essentially what you can't have is a dead-end type of road, okay? Or a 90-degree turn like that. So what happens is when you come in, when you get to this corner, you've got to have a cul-de-sac. So even if you take the homes off, you're still going to have a cul-de-sac, and it's still going to be not too far from where it is now to be able to fit the size of a cul-de-sac in that you have to have under those requirements. So it's still going to be there. So just taking off 3 homes, I don't know that does it as far as that goes. That's been the dilemma. That's where the square corner plan came from, so to speak. Was just say, this is how this would look, but this is why it doesn't meet it, which is why it was not submitted.
Any other observations from my commissioners? Thoughts? Okay. I think I'm after hearing all the comments and from both the opposition and the applicant, I'm actually inclined to offer a motion to approve the application based on the most recent site plan. And I don't know that, Kevin, the new site plan you shared yesterday has been dated yet. I'm assuming it's October 31st.
It has a date of October 21, and
Okay.
I can give it to the clerk, right, so she has it.
All right. Can you put that back on the screen? Oh, you want it back on the screen? Yeah, if we could put that back on the screen, one of my commissioners. All right, that we offer up a motion to approve the site plan dated October 21st that reflects a reduction in the number of units from 67 to 65. But that this site plan be modified on the eastern boundary, or I'm sorry, western boundary, the property. An enhanced 25-foot landscape buffer be incorporated to mitigate any possible negative impacts to the property owner on the west side. This would also be subject to your stipulation letter dated October 24th, and all staff's conditions and recommendations. And that would be my motion.
And I guess amended by your comment regarding the fencing.
Yes. Yes. And just a clarification of note that it's not a wooden fence, decorative wooden fence, it's a wrought iron fence.
That's correct.
Thank you. And that would be my motion.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Call the question. Motion passes 4-0.
Thank you.
Okay, next item is LDP 2022. Maria Alejandro Silva Ortega requests a temporary land use permit to allow occupancy of an accessory structure in land lots 555 and 598 of the 16th district. The property is located on the north side of Post Oak Street Road, east of Post Oak Drive. Is the applicant present? Let the record show the applicant is here. Is there anyone here opposed to LUP 22? No? Okay. Let the record show there's no one opposed to LUP 22.
Good morning. My name is Maria Silva. I live at 2329 Post Oak Road, and I'm here today because I want to convert my existing garage into additional living space for my home. As I noted in my application, shortly after I purchased the home, my father went into kidney failure. He is on dialysis at home, and he requires to be connected to his dialysis machine 12 hours a day. Because he has dementia, he also cannot be unsupervised. On a couple of occasions when I've had to work or no one has been able to be with him, he has disconnected himself, which has required hospital visits to put him on a full course of antibiotics. So due to that situation, he really has to be supervised 24/7. Because of my parents' living situation when I purchased my home and my dad's kidney failure, my parents moved in with me, so they both live with me in the home. I luckily work from home, so I am able to care for my father during the day. My mom runs a business, so she is gone during the day. And currently the house is serving as where I'm living, where my parents are living, where we're doing my father's dialysis treatment, where we're storing my dad's dialysis equipment, and my home office. And it's just really not enough space. So we're hoping to convert the garage, which has been there since I understand 1997, into additional space that we can use. And really more of a private place for me so that in the evenings when my mother is home, I can step away, and during the day, I can have my office in the house, and I can have like a private office where I can take my calls. That is it, and I'm, I guess, open to any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I don't think there was any opposition, so this is in District 3. Commissioner Dance will lead the discussion.
And just a couple of questions. So you work from home currently?
Yes, I do.
Is that permanent?
Yes, it is permanent.
Okay. And what kind of work do you do?
I work for a nonprofit, but basically I do security work for journalists.
Okay. And are your both parents in your home?
Yes, correct.
So your intention would be to live in the home, work in the office, is that right?
Yes.
You're not going to live in the office, right?
So the office would be in the main, my office where I work would be in the main house so that I can be with my father during the day. Because of my dad's dialysis requirements, he really needs a very clean space. And there's a lot of regulations from the dialysis clinic that we have to meet, so he requires a lot of space. And because of those requirements and because of the storage of his dialysis equipment, there isn't really enough space in the house for me to have a bedroom, my parents to have a bedroom, my parents to be able to do, my dad to be able to do dialysis, and to have a space where I can work. And I do really need an office.
Okay. So all three of you do reside in the house?
Correct, yes.
And your intention would be to reside in the house or to reside in the garage?
I would use the garage as my bedroom.
Okay. All right. And that's all the questions I have. Anyone else? Okay. All right, thank you. So, Mr. Peterson, could you just describe the recommendations of staff on this?
Yes, ma'am. The staff did recommend that the application be approved. A large part in part to they did get the neighbors to sign off on it, and the petition is attached to the application. But we also made it for a time certain. We gave them 12 months for the approval. We made it for family use only, and for this applicant only, with some other conditions on the property.
And one of those conditions too addressed a kitchen space, is that right?
Yes, we recommended it be approved, but without a kitchenette. So, a kitchenette would include three things. It would include a refrigerator, a stove with an oven, and a sink. So they can have any two of those, but they can't have all three at once.
Okay. Do you understand that? Okay. Okay. All right, well, I would make a motion to approve subject to all the recommendations of staff.
Consent.
And put it on consent.
Second. Okay, I'm sorry. We've got a motion and a second. Any discussion? We'll call the question. Motion approves 4-0. All right. We've got just a couple of housekeeping things. That was the last case, sir?
Housekeeping.
Just a couple of housekeeping items. To approve our minutes of zoning hearing for the Cobb County Planning Commission on October 4th, 2022. We'll need a motion.
Move to approve the minutes from October 24th.
We have a second.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes for October 4th. Any discussion? I'll call a question. Approved 4-0. And then minutes for our special called meeting, agenda review work session, October 24th, 2022.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Call a question. Motion is approved 4-0. That concludes our meeting for November 1st, 2022. Thank you.